Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, February 9th, 2024, and I've got a great guest joining us from warm and I'm assuming sunny Florida, Laurie Hochman. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Pam. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. Then this is another episode in season 3 of People in Fundraising. Laurie and I just spent a few minutes talking before the recording, and I'm excited to have her as a guest today because she wears 2 hats in the nonprofit sector, and she'll explain that in detail. And just a tip of the hat to Nexus Marketing for connecting me with Laurie a few weeks ago. So Laurie, thank you for your time today, and please tell our audience a little bit about your title and what you do in the nonprofit area.
It's my pleasure. I am the Director of Business Growth and Strategy at Auctria. I'll spell that out for you in case you need it. It's Auctria. You can find us auctria.com. But my role there is anything that isn't related to support. Anything else kind of falls under my jurisdiction, shall we say. And I am out there educating everybody about auction and event fundraising, how to use our platform, as well as how to maximize their revenue, raise money, and raise awareness. So it's a really broad role, which I love. Because I love talking to people like you, Tim, and all these awesome people out there that are raising money for their cause. Because, they always tell us that the donors are the heroes out there. But you know what? It's the people that are activating those donors that are the super duper heroes.
I love that. Thank you. And that's a great mindset to have. So I appreciate you sharing that. So you mentioned your company name, Auctria, and again, a few minutes ago, you told me a little bit about the history of it. So if you could share that with our audience, please.
Sure, that'd be my pleasure. So Auctria was born out of need of auction and event fundraising. People were doing paper bid sheets, Excel spreadsheets, and what a complete nightmare that is. If anybody's that's done that knows exactly what I'm talking about, and they're shaking their head, yep. So at the time when I bumped into Auctria, my background is in medical insurance. I worked for United Healthcare and Big Pharma for many, many years. When my kid was in kindergarten, I stopped working, got sucked into PTA, raised my hand, it said sucker across my forehead, asked a question, and that's how you get reeled in. Fast forward, I became the what do you call it? The Ways and Means, VP Ways and Means for fundraising for the school. And we wanted to run a fundraiser. And I know I'm weaving this together, but it does come together.
Yeah.
They're like, let's do an auction. I'm like, I am not doing an auction unless I can figure out how to do it systematically. Because I came from big business, systems, processes, things like that. And that's the mindset that I went into that job as. I'm going to fundraise and I'm going to do it right and I'm going to do it smart. Bumped into what was originally called Charity Auction Organizer back in 2011, used the product for 2 years. But at that point in time, it was very basic, didn't have any sort of marketing information on the website, didn't have any sort of articles, any sort of surrounding content. It was just like, here's a calculator kind of thing. And it did everything that we needed. Yeah. And I emailed the founder and our CEO, who's amazing. He's our chief developer. I'm like, hey, you don't have any articles. You don't have any info. Can I help you? And ever since then, I've been working at Auctria. We did a name change a couple of years after. We went from Charity Auction Organizer to Auctria and have just blossomed ever since. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And the amazing organizations are making money and money and money for their incredible causes out there.
So cool. Thank you for sharing that. Does Auctria typically have US-based clients, or are there groups like around the world?
Such a funny question because for a long time, I was the only US employee.
Oh, wow.
We're actually headquartered out of Ontario in Canada, and people get confused. Sometimes they're like, "What? Who? Where? Huh? What? Where?" So headquartered out of Ontario. About 80% of our business is US based. About 10% of it is out of Canada. And the remainder is really split between Caribbean, US speaking islands, a little bit in Mexico, a little bit of Australia, a little bit of New Zealand, a little bit of England. So those all splinter out there, small percentages, but the majority of it is in the US, and the second biggest number is out of Canada.
Oh, that's really cool. I love knowing facts like that. So thank you. So you mentioned the company has had a rebrand. It's been around since 2011. How long have you specifically been there, Laurie? And you also mentioned you have a different title from what I knew at the time. So
Okay, I've been here since 2015, and it was, writing articles and things like that. And I was working part-time at the time, and I'm like, well, just a marketing person. I don't really want to be out there, but
yeah.
it just grew and grew and grew and became marketing director. And then we just recently organized ourselves a little differently. And currently my title is Director of Business Growth and Strategy, but it's all pretty much the same thing, working with lovely people like you, working with communication channels. You had mentioned NX Unite had connected us. I do a lot of panels for them, a lot of ongoing webinars, discussions. We do go to conferences, so I manage that process. We do a lot of user education. We do tons of webinars, not only about Auctria platform itself, but how to run an event and auction program.
Mm,
How do you run a show? What revenue boosters should we use? Should we include raffles? Should we not include raffles? Biddable items, not biddable items? How do we market that? How do we promote it? Because we feel like if you know the whole picture, then it's only going to enhance your experience for your guests so that they clutch their pearls, they feel like they're part of your efforts, and open their hearts and open their wallets.
mm. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and are most of your clients that they typically come from, let's say, the arts sector? Are they small nonprofits? Are they healthcare? What's the blend there?
That's a great question too. You're full of great questions, Tim. So I'd say about a third-ish of the organizations that use Auctria are PTOs, PTAs, education-based groups. And that
Okay.
can be anywhere from preschools all the way up through collegiate.
Mm,
All sorts of fraternities, sororities, things like that will use us. So huge K to 12 plus plus. Then we
yeah.
have probably another third that are uh, arts and science, community-based theater, arts and culture rather. And
Okay.
then the other third are more like your UU churches, your Rotary, your Seroptimus, your CASAs, boys and girls clubs.
Oh,
So it's a huge variety. And then there's a sliver. You've got a lot of businesses that do have a philanthropic arm,
yeah.
and they'll do fundraising for their local communities. And they also use Auctria. Those tend to be, your big galas also. And we have
Mm,
organizations that raise, under $10,000 for their event
mm.
versus some organizations that will raise over $1 million for
Whoa.
just a single event. And
Wow.
they'll do it through an online auction. Some of them will do it, through a big black tie, dress up, full length gown gala. Some of them are doing it at a party in the back of the community center. It is just A to Z, all sorts of organizations that are doing some fun stuff. The purpose is, gathering everybody together. They're gonna socialize, and you're gonna raise money and raise awareness.
Yeah, definitely. Have you, on that note about gathering people together, and I'm sorry I'm going off script a little bit, but this is
Oh, good. You
fascinating.
can shoot anything at me.
This is so interesting. You mentioned gathering. So have you noticed a sizable or a back to normal of gathering in person for events now, a few years removed from the pandemic?
So what's really interesting, Auctria has been around, like I said, for a long time, and we always had an online component of Auctria. Always. And like I said, our founder, our CEO is our chief developer. So he like way ahead of the game. And I'll give you my experience from my elementary school that, they're the ones that suckered me in and said, will you volunteer? So we were doing a big event. We do it at the library, lights, dessert, everything. And we were breaking even on our food and our activities, and we were making money at the event. And then we realized, you know what, do we really need to be doing all that on top of all the other work? We don't have that many people show up. We had, I think, like 700 kids in the school, and less than 50 families would show up. It was usually 100 people, 50. So what can we do differently? And at the time, Auctria had an online portion. And so I'm always testing. You love an A/B test, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
So we were testing. We did our last in-person event, which we didn't know at the time. And then we did an online portion of it. And our online portion did as well, if not better. So the following year, we moved to online. And this is way back in 2010, 10-ish, way before COVID ever happened. So we've always had this component of online. So there's always been a mix of people doing exclusively online or in person. Not that any one is better than the other. It's just, what is your audience going to attend and where are they going to participate?
Yeah.
COVID happened, and with our system, all they had to do was go in, people that had stuff going that March had to go into the system, pivot it from silent auction to an online auction. And it was literally that fast, as quick as I can tell you how to do it.
Wow.
The rest of that webinar was talking people off the ledge that it's okay to continue fundraising. People are still hungry. Kids still need to be educated. Shelter does still need to be provided for animals. All the other stuff that's still going on.
Yeah.
So at that point, everything shifted, and we do see things moving back, but some of them did so well on online auctions that they're keeping it, or online events. It's not even just the auction, it's the whole event, because you have peer-to-peer fundraising in there, and you've got donations. So it's not just an auction per se.
Yeah.
So we do see it swinging back, but it's swinging back strategically. I think in the past, everybody's like, oh, we have to have a big party and we have to do this. Now they're thinking about it a little more. They're like, how much do we have to do? Here's an example. I was talking to the ladies at Bangor Symphony up in Maine. So they always do a beautiful event, and they always have a big silent auction. People, put their bids on a piece of paper, and they socialize, and they do pedal raises and donations. And then they went to online auction, same thing, panicked. Oh my gosh. Oh, you know what, Laura, you're right. This is fine. Then they went back to in person because they loved it. I mean, it's a symphony. How you can listen to that on a computer screen? That's crappy, right? You want to see that in person. But what they did is they kept most of their auction online, because now they needed to rent half the size of that space, because now they didn't have to have all their auction items out on display. They didn't have to have all these paper bid sheets. It lowered their cost for the room. It lowered their cost for the tables that they had to rent. So people are taking that knowledge and using it. And I really am cheering for them to continue to make progress and raise money and put more of those dollars in the pockets.
Yeah, and that's a great example from Bangor. I like that. Do you ever get to go to any of the on-site live events, auctions?
Everybody's always asking us, come to my event, come to my event, come to my event. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I came to your event, I'd be going to every single one of them.
Yeah.
I pick and choose here and there, things that I care about, that I support, because otherwise it's impossible, being all over the country.
Yeah.
But a lot of our organizations do some kickoffs, some live streams, some Facebook stuff, and I always tune into those.
Oh, cool. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on, and you've covered several questions already, which has been really rich. So thank you. I want to go to the fourth question about your experience. So you mentioned earlier you came from big pharma and other entities
Right.
where you worked in sales and client services before Auctria. And when we started talking before recording, you also mentioned that you are familiar with a lot of people who wonder, how can I get into nonprofit work? So I'm wondering if this question may help some of those people, given the breadth of your experience before nonprofits. What major skills from those previous roles translated well to what you do at Auctria? And then secondly, are there additional skills that you have to significantly rely on, draw upon in your current role that you needed to build or enhance in your time at Auctria, please?
Okay. I'm gonna give it to you in 2 words and then I'll expand on it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Ready?
Yes.
Be nice.
Oh, I love it.
Be nice to everybody. It's amazing who will donate, who will participate, who will volunteer, who will raise their hand. And that's the truth that I experienced when I was managing teams on, for big insurance companies when I was when I was a pharma rep, talking to all my physicians, dealing with my vendors, just be nice to
Yeah,
everybody.
I love it.
Um, but I'll go ahead and expand on that a little bit.
That in itself's awesome.
But, going back and forth, one of the biggest differences I had, and I don't know if you really asked this question, but I'll give it to you anyway, going from that into, the philanthropic side of it, going into the fundraising side of it, the biggest difference for me, the paradigm shift, was now instead of dealing with employee to employee relationships or employee to vendor relationships, a lot of times you're dealing with, in your sphere, employee to volunteer
Oh,
people.
yeah.
And that's a significant difference because they don't have a responsibility to come in at a certain time. They don't have a responsibility to, draw a paycheck, things along those lines. And that's a significant paradigm shift that I had to do in my mind when I'm asking people to participate, to come and show up and help us, man a line somewhere, or take some donations or clear out the mailbox or things like that.
Yeah.
I was so used to being in that business world where, of course, you ask somebody and usually they do it because you're all kind of working for the same company. But when you're working with volunteers, it's so totally different.
Yeah.
So it brings me back to my always communicate. I always say you can never over communicate. If everybody listens to me in any of my panels that I come to, they're like, here she goes with the over communicate thing, because it's true. The more information you give people and be open and honest, and you did it here with this podcast, Tim, didn't you? You gave me a whole litany of, not a litany, a whole, discussion of here's what to expect.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. And then I feel comfortable and I come in and I know what is going to come at me
Yeah.
so that I can give you that information. You do a lot of prep work in advance. So communicate and then appreciate people along the way. So
Yeah.
those hot tips.
I love those. So be nice, over communicate, and
Appreciate.
appreciate. Yeah. I mean, boy, if everyone could focus on those in
Right.
society.
Right. But if you want to talk about skills per se, I mean, that I always tell people, when we were looking for volunteers, whatever you're good at, we need help with. And that's the
Mm.
same in the philanthropic world. They are businesses, so they still need people to figure out how to fix the roof. They still need people to figure out how to work their computers, how to use their systems, how to manage their payroll for their staff. So if you're doing in the for-profit world still needs to be done in the not-for-profit world. You're just, working with a different group of people, kind of.
Definitely. Yeah. I would love to talk about sort of your volunteer roles, because you mentioned PTA at the beginning. But in the sense of, were there surprises for you again, as a volunteer, or, now with almost a decade at Auctria, about working with nonprofit organizations and leaders and missions and such.
I mean, like getting yelled at the bus stop as a volunteer?
Sure. Did that
Yeah,
really happen?
that absolutely, that surprised me. Somebody was mad at me about something. I don't even recall, but I remember the feeling of this girl just yelling at me at the bus stop while we were waiting for our kids to get off. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we're all volunteers here. We're just
Yeah.
trying to make our school better and get some money to enrich our kids.
Yeah.
So what did you ask me? Were there any surprises?
Yeah, just
Were there?
anything that, just that surprised you, about working as a volunteer in nonprofits, or maybe in your role now with
I
working.
kind of went, yeah, that's a great question. I kind of went in if in it was more for a me kind of thing. I got to, keep an eye on my kid. I got
Mm.
to see what was going on. But then the more you get into it and you realize there's so much good that can happen with those dollars raised is just, I mean, makes you jump out of bed every morning. We do demos about twice a week. And
Oh,
I always ask people geographically where they're tuning in from because I'm nosy. But secondly, I always ask them what kind of organization they're fundraising for, because that's what fills me every single day. And it's everything,
mm.
everything.
Yeah.
They've got equestrian for veterans, and they've got,
Mm.
research that they're doing for, all sorts of diseases. We have one organization called, their event is called Scramble for Sight, and it's a golf tournament. They've been running it for about 20 some years,
Mm.
and it's a fundraiser using Auctria, using an auction, and they have been fundraising to research for some blindness. They found some sort of, I'm not going to get it exactly right, some sort of genetic marker.
Mm.
They figured out which genetic marker that was, and they found a drug for it where they do like a single
Oh,
injection of some sort into the eye, and these people can see.
wow. Oh, that's
I
awesome.
mean, right?
Yeah.
So that's what drives me every day. That's why, it sounds superficial when I ask people in the chat who you fundraising for, but I'm like, I want to know, because that just it blows us up.
Yes, it does. Oh, that's great. Are you still involved, in your community in various ways as a volunteer or as a donor, Laurie?
Both. I help with both. I can't stop. And anybody that calls me, I help them also.
Oh,
Once you're there, you're there. And then I'm
yes.
always peeking in on people and what they're doing. Even the people that come to our demos, or that we have an events directory where people can put up their events and they can
Mm.
tag in, and so it's public. And I'll go in there, and if I know I've talked to them and I see there's a typo, or if I see there's, a page that should be above another or moved over, deleted because they're not running tickets, but they have a tickets page in there, I'll be like, I went in your page and I took out this, or I fixed your typo, and I just can't help it, because I want them to look amazing.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, that's great. I think, when you get a taste for nonprofits and the impact, whether it's time or money or just sharing expertise, it really does get into you, and that's really cool. And if you can focus on, as you mentioned before, like be nice, appreciate, communicate, whether that's with your volunteers, donors, um, bosses, what have you. That's
Absolutely,
all important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you go from the for-profit sector to the not-for-profit sector. For the for-profit, you're making widgets, you're selling a service, you're B2B, however that is, it's coming in as revenue, right?
Yeah.
But when you pivot to the not-for-profit, you're not selling anything. So now how are you gaining money? So you have cash on the asset side of your spreadsheet, and
Yeah.
it's through fundraising, it's through grants, it's through donations. That's the biggest thing that you kind of have to wrap your mind around. We're not selling anything. We're not providing any services, how are we gaining those dollars in order to put our services out there? So, there's a lot of thought leaders out there. Listening to podcasts like yours is an amazing opportunity to hear different voices. There's a lot of you had mentioned NX Unite. Nexus hooked us up. They do a lot of panels also. So I always tell people, open your eyes, open your ears, and listen and watch and follow along and see what people are doing. I think you mentioned you guys are on LinkedIn and you'll post this to LinkedIn.
That's right.
Go ahead and follow me. You can follow Auctria also. I just usually repost what Auctria does, but I'm always sharing and grabbing information and putting it out there, and just watch and follow. And it's amazing how you'll develop your own pathway.
Yeah, so true. I like that a lot. That's great advice. My last question, Laurie, it's not on the sheet, but I love that framed painting, or it's not a painting. It is
multidimensional. It's glass on glass on glass. It's an artist. I live in South Florida, so they do a lot of art festivals down here all year round. I think all the artists come south in the winter.
Sure.
And this happens to be an artist. His name is Murph, M-U-R-F, and he does a lot of really bright things. And if you haven't noticed, I tend to be a bright and happy person. So it's something that I was attracted to.
Oh, it's so cool. I love all the variety of the colors and the layers of glass. And then I'm a baseball fan, and some of those colors really remind me of the Miami Marlins uniform and some of their artwork in their newish stadium. I don't know how far you are from Miami, but
we go down there all the time.
Okay.
They interesting tidbit. So when they had built that stadium behind the umpire, where I'm not going to get the terms right, where they're hitting the bat, right?
Yeah.
Where the fans are, right? They made those. Yes, they made those into aquariums, and there were fish in those. And when they took over the ownership recently, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, they took the fish out, and there was this big upheaval because people had taken them out. And it was so colorful. It was like movement. They even had a pool in the back. It was just amazing.
Yeah. Such a vibrant community in that region.
For sure.
Baseball is such a sport where there's tradition and, purists and whatnot, but Miami can get away with just adding more vibrancy and some eclectic design to it. So
sure. Well, the Savannah Bananas have certainly shown us that baseball can diversify a little bit and still attract people.
That's true. Yes. Well, Laurie, on that theme of be kind and appreciate, you have been really kind, thoughtful, generous with your time today, and I greatly appreciate it. We had not talked until 45 minutes ago. I've learned a lot today, and it's been really a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to call you a friend now.
Likewise, thank you. And yeah, I'd love to, you mentioned Facebook groups for a nonprofit, so I'd love to talk with you offline about that as well. That sounds really cool.
Sounds great.
Well, for our audience, you can find this great interview with Laurie Hochman on LinkedIn and YouTube, as well as on Spotify and Podbean in audio format in early May of 2024. So I appreciate my audience tuning in, listening in, and their support. And Laurie, I wish you a great rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thanks. I always close out any conversation that I have wishing people bids that soar, and I hope they crush the fundraising goal.
That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that. Have a good day.